I'd like to call this meeting of the Coventry Town Council to order at 6:01 p.m. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Here.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Here.
Councilmember Shockley.
Here.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Here.
President Lima.
Here, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the event of an emergency, those present this evening can exit outdoors labeled 1 or 2 to the back parking lot or front lawn of Town Hall. At this time, I will seek a motion to take the minutes, the executive session minutes of February 27th and March 12th, and the open session minutes of March 18th as a block.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilmember Pasqua. Any discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Motion passes.
This time we'll take a motion to approve the minutes of February 27th, March 12th, and March 18th.
Motion.
Motion
Second.
by Councilman Pasqua, second by Vice President LeBlanc. Any discussion? Clerk, did you receive any edits? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Motion passes.
Okay. This time we'll move to public comment on docketed items only. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment on docketed items? Come to the podium, turn on the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Any members of the public on Zoom? Raise your hand, unmute yourself, and state your name and address for the record. Public comment going once, twice, 3 times. Public comment is now closed. Members of the council, may I have a motion to take the agenda out of order?
Make the motion.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilmember Shockley. Any discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Motion passes.
At this time, we'll take introduction of new matters before the council, discussion and or action in regards to 3 requests from Coventry Fire Districts for funds that the town of Coventry received from the opioid settlement. This is pages 31 to 51 in our packets.
Point of order.
Councilman Pasqua.
I'm going to recuse potential conflict.
Okay, just fill out the form with the clerk. Okay. Madam Clerk, could you reflect the record that Mr. Pasqua has left the dais? So members of the council, we have before us a few letters from Coventry's fire districts, Central Coventry, Anthony, and I believe Hopkins Hill is in here as well. Yes, Hopkins Hill is in there. This is with respect to the allocation of funds from the opioid settlement that the town received to purchase equipment related to that settlement. Manager Prillo, I don't know if you want to just speak to this and give the latest update on that settlement amount and the requests.
Sure. Currently, we have about $490,000 on a defined opioid account. The use of that money is restrictive, however, not as restrictive as opera funding. So it is pretty broad when it comes to use of it. It's for treatment, prevention, counseling. There's a lot of broad categories. I did speak to someone from one of the agencies that oversees it. and they said that it is pretty open if it's being utilized by any police department or fire organization in the treatment of opioids, as long as it's documented what's being utilized properly on our end. Then it's approved. We don't have to get any pre-approvals. It's basically up to the town to manage the funds that we get. So whatever process the town wants to put in place, my recommendation would be some type of MOU agreement between the town and each district. They are able to provide documentation of what they purchased, and we can refund them to Mr. Civetti. That's why I think it would work best for us documentation wise. And this way, if anything came back in some kind of audit down the road, we would have everything in line. So that's kind of where we are right now. We have the 3 requests from the chiefs. A couple items are similar, a couple are different, but it's items that they feel will best help them serve the community against the opioid issue that we're dealing with right now.
I tend to agree with having an MOU in place. It's not so much, I agree that these are, what they've outlined is a worthwhile use of these funds. I guess I just want to make sure that we're all accountable and the funds are used for said purpose, because solicitor, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that much like ARPA in some ways, we could be audited for how these are spent, and if they're not spent on what they're restricted to, we're held accountable.
Yeah, they can be used for a restricted purpose. Because we don't have a municipal fire service, once you make the appropriation, you lose control over the funds. So you would be and with that, you'd still be responsible for how they're spent. That said, I think a memorandum of understanding would cover the situation. Obviously, if the funds are not spent for their intended purpose, then they would need to come back to the town from the district in some way based on an audit. But that's, it wouldn't take long to pay for that.
Okay. Discussion from members of the council? Vice President LeBlanc.
I'll make a motion to approve these requests with the requirement that an MOU be put in place and receipts be submitted for the purchases.
I second that
Motion
motion.
by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilman Capaldi. Discussion on the motion? Vice President LeBlanc.
I see these funds very similar to COVID funds. This is a settlement that the town received. It's not tax related. And I do believe that the fire departments, just like we gave them COVID funds, deserve a piece of the settlement funds. And clearly from the documentation submitted, they're buying equipment that is for this exact purpose.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is our department, even though it's outside the town, that takes care of this sort of issue for us. I'm hoping that the purchases they make are going to be beneficial on top of just this purpose. So I'm glad we have the opportunity to help fund these.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Capaldi,
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley,
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc,
Yes.
President Lima,
Yes.
4 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
Moving on to resolutions of the council, item B, resolution 2024-33, provisional adoption of FY 25 budget. It's on page 29 in your packets. Manager Perillo.
So this is just a summary of what I had proposed in my budget in resolution form. Obviously, the council can move forward with any amendments if they so choose, but that just documents where we are regarding numbers, capital, opera, and everything that I discussed during last meeting. So that is the document right now. Obviously, it can be amended and changed, and that's what we're here to do tonight. That's
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Superintendent Cower, I know that you had wanted to move up in the agenda and have an opportunity to speak. I don't know if you wanted to.
Thank you. I appreciate you moving this agenda item up, so I can get to the high school for their scholarship night. I don't have a presentation prepared, but I know at the last meeting, there was a lot of conversation about different things going on with the school department with reconfiguration and budgeting. And I wanted to be available tonight to be able to answer any questions that you may have. If you don't have any questions, obviously, there's nothing for me to say, but if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I will say that I tried to address or anticipate what you were looking for with the letter I sent to you last week. I tried to outline the basic understanding of the decision that was made and why it was made. And then I also sent you some documents today. The original presentation, when we presented our budget, had a table that I shared that had the tax collected, the amount spent on the town and the amount spent on the school by year with dollars and percentiles. And we were asked to expand upon that, which we did. And I sent you a copy of that electronically and I gave you a paper copy. I know it's a little small. I apologize for that. If there's any questions, I can answer those as well, or I can take those offline if you need me to.
Councilmember Shockley.
I had questions just because this budget is so based upon the idea that the school consolidation would take place this year.
Mhm.
So I want to know both what that process looks like for making that consolidation happen. And on top of what we have budgeted right now, on top of the cuts you made to reach this budget, what you would expect to see for savings from that and what your plan might be going on in the future.
So the reconfiguration plan was withdrawn. I had said that in my letter. I did that at a meeting in February. Once that plan was withdrawn, the next 3 school committee meetings were about coming up with a new budget, taking a more traditional approach that we have taken in prior years, where we look at different positions based on enrollment, based on programs that are not required by either contract or law, and to see where we can come up with some cuts. When we first presented the reconfiguration plan, one of the first things that was made apparent to all of us is that when we did our 3-year projection for you folks back in November, we saw that we had a $1.8 million deficit going into 25, and that's not something that can happen. So the purpose of the reconfiguration plan was to essentially erase that deficit so that we could start planning and budgeting appropriately after that. So we were looking at about $2.1 million in savings. I know a lot of people ask me, like, I haven't seen the finances behind it. Essentially, it was positions. We were looking at 10 to 15 positions. And the reason why there's a range is because we were also anticipating some retirements. When we eliminate positions, we don't get the full benefit of what we get when we have a retirement. When we have a retirement and a position is eliminated through attrition, we get the full benefit of the salary and the benefit and everything. So it could range up to $140,000. When we eliminate a position and people have to then bid into other positions, we may get a low step teacher. We may get something that offsets that savings. So the savings is not the same. So there's a range. Once we knew we weren't going to do the reconfiguration and we started planning at the school committee level on our budget, our priority was to eliminate that $1.8 million deficit to get under the 4% ask to the town. And we eliminated 17.5 positions in that budget. We went through all our expenses. We went through everything we possibly could to get to that point. Many of the positions that we eliminated in that process were some of the positions that would have been embedded in the reconfiguration plan. So to say that going from this point on, we can just now layer the reconfiguration savings on top of everything we've already done, mathematically doesn't work, because all the work that we've done to get to the point we're at now includes some of those savings. And so the 2.1 is not a viable savings at this point. So going forward, what we'd like to do, and this was the biggest complaint for anybody who attended a meeting, watched the news, the biggest complaint that we got from the community was that we were moving too fast. And the reason why we're moving fast, and I said this publicly many times, is I was trying to get it through so the planning part was done, but I was trying to get it so it aligned to this budget calendar so I can implement for next year to recognize that savings as soon as possible. So our plan going forward is After this budget process is done, we're going to pull together a committee or commission, whatever you want to call it. We'll have representatives from the town side, if people are interested in participating, the school committee, and also residents. And we'll look at a bunch of different possible solutions. People brought up things like a whole town redistricting, where we'd redistrict the entire town into different school zones. Some people talked about taking one individual school offline and what the savings would be for that. Some people talked about consolidating a few grades, but do it in a different way so kids don't have to travel as far on buses. So those are just three things that came out. So the plan going forward for next year is to do that planning over the summer, prepare a number of different options, present those options so that when we start working on the 26 budget, we can embed that plan into what those savings would be. Did I answer your question? Did I miss anything?
Further discussion from the council for the superintendent? So I appreciated seeing the note about formulating a committee or commission to study this. I think that it shouldn't be a matter of if the town side is interested in being involved. I think they should be involved from the get-go. I know we're frequently told to stay in our lane and not concern ourselves with how you operate, but I think that if there was a united front behind a solution between the 5 of us up here and the 5 on the school committee, that could help make the sell better to the community. I know that all of us up here, with the exception of Elisa, who wasn't sitting on the council at the time, were blindsided by the decision and the plan because we had no clue it was coming. We were asked questions by constituents, people who didn't understand that even a school committee existed or that we don't control the schools. I mean, we received just as much question, and we were asked to advocate on their behalf to you, which I said, that's not my place. They need to communicate with the school committee and the school department directly. So I would argue that it shouldn't be a matter of if the town's interested in discussions about deficit reduction. I mean, we had the Auditor General letter that went to all parties involved that said it should be collaborative. So I know that the sentiment has been that we should stay out of it and stay in our lane, but I think that with something that's this serious and this big, everybody needs to be at the table and everybody needs to support that message.
I don't misinterpret my words. I wasn't saying it that way. Like, I didn't think you'd want to participate. I was saying that I would extend the invitation. If you were interested, you would participate.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at my track record, just to be honest, I've been a collaborator from the beginning. I've invited people into things whenever I possibly could. The timing of the reconfiguration was moving quickly, and I had been communicating with the town manager and town finance director at a surface level, just because we were trying to get some ideas across their plate. But I did ask them not to share it yet, because what ended up happening, which sideswiped the whole plan, was what I was afraid was going to happen, which was people would have bits and pieces of information, share it on social media. People would hang on to things that were inaccurate, spread them, and then at the end, no matter how good a plan it was dead in the water. And that's essentially what happened. It was a good plan. It's just that there was so much negative momentum behind it. I didn't think I could sell it. And if I'm gonna be smart about things, going forward with a plan where I didn't have one public testimony or voice in support of is risky. So I believe that we can make, and we did make the cuts to get under the 4%. The only deficit that has been identified is the deficit that the Auditor General's letter called out from 22. And now that we're finishing up that audit, we have a better sense of what that dollar amount is. If you recall, my finance office identified that deficit, and we notified the school committee in the town that we had a deficit. We self-reported, we wrote a letter, we came up with an idea of a draft of a plan, and there has been a number of meetings going on. But in terms of this year, whatever we get for funding, and I hope it's appropriate, but whatever we get for funding, we're going to budget so that we are working within that. It's not our job to create budgets that don't align with the funding that we get. We are charged with, just like you're charged in a fiduciary manner, so are we. So whatever I get, I have to work with. My job is to advocate for the school department and to get what I think is necessary for the school department. And I believe that the cuts that would have to be made, if we were going to get $225,000 in operating would be significant, and not the kind of cuts that I think helps move a district forward. They're the kind of cuts that districts make when they are desperate and they are kind of stuck, and I don't want to be identified that way.
Any further discussion for the superintendent? Vice President Blank.
Kind of going along the lines of President Lima, one thing I was surprised about was the deficit reduction plan, the letter that was sent to the Auditor General. It wasn't discussed with the town council, at least to my knowledge, it never came in front of us. And it essentially mandated us to provide the school with $146,000 per year for 5 years. And that was never discussed with us, unless you can correct me.
I can't correct you, but what I can say to you is that was a plan that we proposed. The letter from the Auditor General basically says that our finance department and your finance department have to come together to formalize that plan, and that the school committee as a body has to vote for it and the town council as a body has to vote for it. So what we proposed in our letter, which is required by law, is we can't just say we have to have we have a deficit. We have to make some sort of remedy recommendation. If that 140 per year, which is sort of the standard recommendation from what I understand from people who are involved in dealing with accounting and offsetting deficits, is basically taking the amount that we owe for that year and dividing it by 5 and coming up with equal payments. If the finance departments from each side come up with something different and that's what we agree on, then we can move forward with that. But the intent, and I talked to the town manager about this and I apologize, when we drafted that letter, we were just providing a remedy because we're legally responsible for providing a remedy. But we knew at the end, both council and school committee were going to have to vote for it.
So I guess hypothetically, if we were to give you the ask that the school committee has currently asked for this budget, would you be funding that 146, or would you still expect the town council on the town admin side to be paying for that?
Yeah, so I don't have a straight answer in the terms of I can think forward, but I would say that the 140 is something that we owe you, right? Or owe the town, because we have a 700 approximately. I think it's gonna be a little less after this audit. I think it's like in the 620, 640 range. But whatever it is that we owe, we have to pay back. So either you cut it out ahead of time and take it before you give us our allocation, or you give us our allocation and then we have to pay it back. But we're responsible for that. What I hope to have happen is make sure that in knowing that we're dealing with this deficit, knowing that we identified it, knowing that we self-reported it, is not something that we did underhandedly. I wasn't even superintendent when it happened. I came on the clock and I identified it and we took action, which is, by the way, the exact same thing that happened with the sewer. That septic system has been in disrepair since 10 or 20 years. I found it, I brought it to people's attention, said this needs to get fixed. I think that's a way better approach than turning and looking the other way. And so we identified it, we'll pay it, but I hope the schools are funded in a way so that we can continue to operate successfully and provide the students what they need to be successful in Coventry.
Appreciate the answer.
Further discussion from the council, superintendent? All right, I do think it's, I know that Director Civetti had the letter on his report for tonight.
It's on our committee agenda as well for Thursday.
So I just wanted to, if the council was agreeable, just jump over to his report. It seems like it's timely since it's being discussed. Sorry, is this startling you?
That's okay. No, so again, everybody received, a copy of that correspondence from the Auditor General, I believe dated April 4th. So I just included in with the packet in case any of the council members, had any questions or concerns regarding the letter. But I did have a meeting with the Auditor General as well as Department of Municipal Finance on Friday morning. So on the 5th, we discussed the correspondence. One of the items, there was discussion, I guess, or hearing comments that, could we move forward with this budget? Because the Auditor General's on the second page and one of the paragraphs mentioned that once the plans are submitted and approved by the Auditor General's office, we request the plans be adopted in the town and school department's budget. So the concern was, could we actually move forward with a budget even though we don't have the deficit reduction plan, or do we have to wait for the deficit reduction plan? So the Auditor General indicated this is just, to get everybody aware of the situation, make sure we're all on the same page. As he states in the letter, we've been working together with the school department, town manager. We've had meetings on a monthly basis related to the audits, projected deficits. So he felt that, this letter is not meant to stop us from progressing with the budget process. We should be moving forward. He knows we have to continue operations. He would just like us to formalize a document, get it to his office. So I'll be reaching out to, Chris in the school department. We'd like to get the letter to the Auditor General by next Wednesday so that they have a chance to review it. And then we can discuss it with the Auditor General at our next meeting, which is scheduled for the 23rd of the month. Obviously we understand, the final deficit reduction plan does have to come before the council, but just put all the communications. They want like updated budget actuals, projection on where we think we're finishing this year, which, in all our meetings up to date, we've indicated, or schools indicated that they feel like they're break even for the current fiscal year. So they just want to make sure we're on track and that we have, proper procedures in place, which, as he says in the letter, he's comfortable that he thinks, having some stability within management is helping the process, and hopefully, we get the 2022 issued quickly, 2023 right after, and 24, we'd be back on time and have it issued prior to the December 31st deadline.
Discussion from the council on that? Thank you. I want to be conscious of your time. Did you need to be here for the resolution on the Washington Oak rooftop unit too? or-
I don't need to be. I explained it to Dan. It's really, you've already voted on a very similar resolution with the
Yep.
last rooftop unit. It's at the same school. This is what happens when schools get a little bit older, and this is the new school, right? When they start getting a little bit older, things fail. And so
Okay.
this is the second rooftop unit at that Washington Oak school that needs to be replaced. So the impact fees it's almost the exact same request.
Okay.
Can I just add one last thing?
Yeah, sure.
And then I'll get out of your way. I did also talk to Dan. I asked, not Dan, I asked Chris to reach out to the Auditor General just to make sure for the 22 audit, because I know we're looking to finish that up and slide right into 23. If there's anything the school department owes, is there anything the school department hasn't provided? Are they waiting for anything from the school department? And they said no, and they emailed Chris a confirmation that there's no. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I think there was comments that the 22 audit was held up by the school department, and I don't know if Bob has a different opinion, but I don't feel like that was the case at all. We did our field work first. We were responsive to every request they had. We worked with the town side very well in making sure we collaborate with each other. So there's nothing going on in the school department and the finance office that has slowed the 22 audit down at all.
All right, thanks. Any last call for council member discussion? Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Do you
you.
mind if I sneak out?
No, go for it.
Okay.
Yes, congrats to the students.
Don,
members-
could you check on the volleyball game? Just see how they're doing?
Members of the council, if you don't mind, we just have 2 licenses. I want to be conscious of the business owners before we dive into the budget, if you don't mind. Okay. So we'll move back up to licenses. Item A, no mobile food establishment license, DG LLC, doing business as Iggy's Food Truck, yearly license. This is pages 21 to 22 in our packet. Do I hear a motion to approve the license?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Vice President Blank, second by Councilman Pasqua. Any discussion? Do we have anyone here from this? Oh, hi. Welcome. Good. How are you? Come on up. Just state your name and address for the record. Make sure the mic's flipped on.
Yep.
Push it.
Lynn
there you-
D'Souza, and my home address, 881 Greenwich Avenue, G37, Warwick, Rhode Island, 02886.
Great. Thank you. You want to talk to just a little bit about the food truck?
Sure. So we've had the food truck about a year. We've had a lot of positive feedback from, the state of Rhode Island and also Massachusetts, Connecticut. We do public and private events. We also do events like Mulligan's Island. We make packages, basically for whatever your needs are. We've done birthday parties, we've done weddings. It's been really well. It's been positive, so.
Great. Any discussion from the council? All right, hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes,
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Item B, new mobile food establishment license, Regional Career and Technical Center yearly license. Pages 23 to 24 in our packet. Do I hear a motion to approve the license?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilmember Shockley. Discussion. And ask, Madam Clerk, I take it these applications are all, okay. Any discussion? Anyone here from the school to speak? Oh, hi. Welcome back.
I feel like I was just here. Hi, Lori Ferguson, Director of the Career Center. Do you want my address? No. I was just here, but
Yeah.
our license was only until the end of April, so we had to renew it. We needed to get the license at that time in order to proceed with everything else. So yes, I'm back, and I wouldn't mind if you waived the fee for us since I'm paying it again.
What's the fee?
Fee is $75. We did just pay it.
I can make the motion to waive the fee.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilman Pasqua to waive the fee. Any discussion? Vice President LeBlanc,
Just waiving the fee due to the duration of the first license.
any other discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes,
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
and we're back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the license approval? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes,
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Moving back to resolutions, resolution item A, 2024-32, approving a purchase of a rooftop unit to control heat and air conditioning at Washington Oak School. This is on page 28 in your packet. Do I hear a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Councilmember Shockley, second by Councilwoman Capaldi. Manager Perillo?
Just want to let you know, there's 250,000 in that impact fee account, so that more than covers the 34,000 they're requesting.
Any discussion on the resolution? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
Moving to item C in resolutions 2024-34, supporting Governor Daniel J. McKee's Litter Free Rhode Island campaign. It's on page 30 in your packets. Manager Perillo, did you want to speak to this?
Maria.
Oh, Maria, okay.
To the event at the State House last week.
Good evening. This resolution is really just something that the governor's office requested. They're looking to get all 39 cities and towns to approve a resolution to encourage everyone to participate in Earth Day. And they have provided grant funding for folks across the state, both cities and towns and nonprofits, to get bags and gloves and things of that nature. It's a big campaign on behalf of the governor's wife. So this is an easy one. Yeah.
Since we already do an Earth Day. Do I hear a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc,
I'll second it.
second by Councilwoman Capaldi. Any discussion on the resolution? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
Okay, we'll now move back to item B, resolution 2024-33, provisional adoption of FY25 budgets. To get discussion going, do I hear a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Vice President Blank,
Second.
second by Councilman Pasco. Discussion. Councilmember Shockley.
So I guess as part of the discussion, I moved forward with the idea that if the school can't do the consolidation project this year, this is an unsustainable budget. I think our finance director has said they need at least half of what they'd asked for. When speaking with some of the information the town manager put out, it looks as if we think they need more than they're asking for. So what I didn't want to do is take away from all of the things that we're trying to slowly build in the town. And I certainly didn't look at the town manager's budget and think it was full of fluff. It's definitely, there are definitely needs within the town, but I did go through the budget. And I tried to do some line iteming just based on the idea that we still have ARPA funds. We are lucky enough that as a council, unlike past councils, we are able to approve a budget based on how we end up allocating these funds. So I just wanted to put out some ideas that I had and get feedback from the council. So my first line, and I went backwards. So I started with our capital improvement. We had $511,710. Manager Perillo had broken that down into individual items. So what I did is I took 3 of those items, one being the school window replacement, one being Giblin Playground, and one being the Old North Road drainage, and took the idea that we could allocate those to ARPA funds. So that would have reduced the budget by $210,000 and given us an amount of a little over $300,000 in the budget, still going towards capital. So certainly not removing a line item, but making it so it wasn't growing as much this year. Secondly, I know we're putting money aside for the capital leasing program. We're trying to put money aside every year. Not that I'm married to this idea, but I broke that in half for this year. The expense isn't coming into this year's budget. So instead of 190,000, I put 95,000, leaving 95,000 in the budget for that. This is a smaller line item, but it was early days when I was looking at the budget. So I took the line item for snow removal overtime and decreased it by $10,000 to last year's amount to $85,000. Knowing that when we discussed with the town manager the state reimbursement for our roads projects, at the time when the town manager was doing the budget, he believed that that money had to go back to ARPA because it came from ARPA. And we later learned that actually it can't. So we want that to go back towards the road improvements and paving. With that in mind, the town manager and both he and Mr. Civetti were extremely helpful to me in going over the budget in this process. They said that $142,000 has already been received from the state for projects done, and we expect over $600,000 to be coming back after projects are completed in the summer. Based on that, I took the $500,000 we had allocated towards the road, decreased that by $100,000 to $400,000. For repairs for sidewalks, I decreased that by $50,000 to $100,000. Keeping that money in the budget because that is something the council decided we wanted. Hopefully we can increase that by more next year. But keeping in mind that we are going to be able to use that state aid kind of towards a revolving fund is what I hope. The police motor vehicles, we had a line item for one motor vehicle of $82,767. Because it is still available this year, I had thought that possibly could go towards ARPA as well. That's the last line item I believe I've tried to allocate towards those ARPA funds. Another thing, unlike the other departments in town, the police, they assume anyone who might be able to retire and allocate a retirement coverage payout. In this case, they assumed 6 people. Because they don't have any guaranteed retirements on the books, I thought an allocation of 6 people seemed like a lot, reduced it to 3 just for the purposes of working on numbers. So that decreased the budget by an additional $83,873. Also, with the number of police officers they're assuming, in their assumption, they factored in for 6 retirements, but didn't assume any loss of staff when they did their numbers for the number of officers, I don't believe. So getting some numbers from the town manager, it seems as if 2 officers would be about $140,000. I thought that might be another place we could decrease the town expenditure. And then the final place that I have thought of, and I'm just giving my own ideas here, the town solicitor's budget, while it's a crapshoot for that sort of thing, we never know what might come our way. I know this year we had a lot of contract negotiations. Hopefully with some of our larger projects where we're nearing an end line, and there's a lot of cleanup and different projects that the solicitor and his team have done this year as well. So we had raised that to $680,000 and I had reduced it to $600,000. The total of those changes equals about $851,000. Because that was my intent, I allocated it towards the schools. And in this instance, reducing the town side and increasing the school side ended up with each getting about a little over 50% of their ask. So those are just some ideas I wanted to throw out at the beginning of the conversation. As you all know, I don't want to create a situation for us with the school this year that we couldn't come back from next year as far as financial. So I just wanted to put those ideas on the table for everyone.
Further discussion from members of the council? Vice President LeBlanc.
The town manager did submit an email to the council letting us know that there was a discussion between himself and the chief, and there were 55 officers currently in their budget. The chief had indicated that they could reduce that down to 54, and that would be a savings of 85,000. So that would be Department 710. We would reduce the officer 1 line item by 85,000. In that same discussion, though, the town manager had cut the chief's repairs and maintenance for vehicles from 65,000 down to 40. The chief asked for that 25,000 back. And then there was also another repairs and maintenance line for computers. Originally, the chief asked for 114,457. The town manager reduced that by 14,457 down to 100K. So the chief asked for $15,000 increase to that line. So net, there would be a savings of $50,000. So again, asking for an increase of 20,000 to the manager's request on repairs and maintenance for vehicles, and a $15,000 increase for repairs and maintenance of computers, and a reduction of 85,000 to the officer 1 line item. This is all within Department 710. Just wanted to make that suggestion that we make that amendment to this budget.
Are you making a formal amendment or just throwing it out?
Formal.
So we have an amendment from Vice President LeBlanc.
I'm sorry, did I do it wrong? Like, I thought we were having some conversations right now and I didn't necessarily want to formally change anything until we'd gone through all these. So in my mind,
We don't have to do mine right now. That's fine.
okay. Because I like that you put the ideas out on the table. In my mind, I don't know if our intent was to give the police an allocation, and regardless of how they spent it, they were going to get that allocation, because it was decided if we're reducing 1 line from the email this afternoon from the town manager, we should increase in other places under the police. But they're seeing over 6% increase this year in the budget. So if the town manager had seen those cuts as amenable for this year's budget, increasing them this year doesn't seem necessary.
So I was doing a reduction of 85.
Yeah, no.
But an increase on 2 other ones, but there's still a savings of 50.
100%.
All within the same department.
Yep. No,
So I'm
I understand
confused.
what you were doing. I'm just saying, even though the reduction was something that I had thought about, it wasn't in order to increase the police department in other lines. Like the police department's getting a pretty significant part of this budget. And just because we're decreasing their employee line doesn't necessarily mean, and these might just be things you want to increase because you find them important, that we would increase the other line items.
So I guess I'm just a little confused, but we're still getting a savings of 50,000, so it's still getting reduced in
Yep.
totality.
Yes.
So that just, okay.
And I want to be clear that people are allowed to make amendments. I mean, that might be your preference that people wait, but if people want to make.
And that's what I'm
amendments,
asking,
if
like,
they
should I
want
have
to.
made this an amendment when I gave my ideas? Because I thought it might be easier, like just dollar wise, at the end, if kind of we came to an agreement as to where we might want to add and subtract throughout the course of the budget.
Sure. Any further discussion? Members of the council? Personally, at large, I am not in favor of keeping the current increase where it is. I'd like to see it cut further, not just money moved, personally. So I kind of did along the same lines as Councilmember Shockley in terms of finding some one-time expenses or trying to ease the burden of ramping up funding for certain line items. In particular, there were some places where line items like vehicle maintenance might have gone up by 275,000 in one jump. Or I'm looking at some other ones. Same with roads and sidewalks as well, was another one. Some of them I felt we shouldn't touch with ARPA because we made a commitment, like in particular, we made a commitment to keep sanitation in-house, and we need to honor that commitment. We had that vote. We need to make that investment. And then also the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years to slowly fund a revaluation line item. So that way that's not a huge chunk. So I had done kind of some collective shimmying of ARPA with some one-time funds. I had looked at codification of ordinances, IT operations. There were some hardware and software purchases, finding a way to ramp up the sanitation repair parts line item, ramping up sidewalks, and then also if we can ramp up some of the steeper parks and rec line items as well. And then my other question to the town manager was, is there any wiggle room on the increase in police overtime? I mean, that's a huge jump. And I know we had issues this year with, and we were concerned about staying within the budget, but is there any wiggle room at all, even in the tens of thousands on that?
Tough to tell. Obviously, our original plan was to have 3 in the academy in July, and obviously that can't happen, so we're down to 2. So that's going to already increase the overtime line. We're hoping to get 3 seats for January. Obviously, bodies help the overtime. We have 1 lateral that I'm swearing in next week, and we're trying to get 2 others. So the more bodies we get, the less overtime we need. So it's really a moving target. I think it was best identified that that's the number that we think it's going to be. But could it be below that? It could be. If we fill all these spots, it could definitely be below that. If we don't fill these spots, it may be more than that.
Okay.
So there's no easy answer to police overtime.
It's
you
just
have
a huge jump from the 3 historical.
Yeah, true. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, it's based on all the information that we have currently. God forbid you get 3 officers that get injured in one event and they're out for 3 or 4 months, then the overtime is going to be through the roof. So I think even with the retirement line item, I know there's 6 people that are eligible to retire this year. We only budgeted for 3. I'm sorry. 3.
Oh, he had said 6 when he was at the last. So that's already down?
Because their average severance salary is about $50,000. So I think we budgeted for 3, and up to 6, if you want to include the chief, can retire. We don't expect that to happen, but we want to have some money in there in case we get perfect storm and all 6 do leave. Then we're going to be short, obviously. So we try to do the best way of managing based on historical information, based on what the chief's hearing from some of the officers. We have one officer that just left after 50 years. We have a couple others now that are at 28 years. They could leave tomorrow. So it's a moving target. That's my simple answer. Sorry.
I just want to be careful how much we supplant in the town side with ARPA, because we've worked so hard in the last few years to build back really important line items in this budget, like investments in our infrastructure, and not just DPW, but infrastructure in terms of Parks and Rec is being built back from, I think they were cut by almost $500,000 during the COVID years. More than that? Even before that. And then the same thing too with some of the investments we're making with respect to the clerk's office and those functions and services. I want to make sure that we're not taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. These are needed investments that need to be built in. So I just want to be cautious about how much we dial back the ramping up of funding these in the line item with real operational dollars. Some other things I wanted to bring up that I think this council should consider. I know in the past, Director McKee has brought up that machine that washes the undercarriage of trucks. I think if we're going to be really serious about taking really good care of the vehicles that we have in DPW, that's a place that's preventative maintenance to start, to try and get some of these repair line items down in terms of parts and service. Multiple times the solicitor has brought up that we need to adjust our licensing fees in the clerk's office. They're very out of date, and that's something that we could have the power to make happen at the April 23rd meeting, so it's in time to adjust for revenue projections for this budget. And then also the thing that we've talked about multiple times, which is when Councilmember Shockley and Vice President Blank sat for the first time in November of 2020 and were basically hostage to decrease the fair share development fee. That's something that absolutely needs to be set back at a reasonable rate. And especially with the amount of development happening in this town, I would imagine the revenue projection should be significant for that. So I'd ask the council to consider those items as well, as prudent initiatives or budget items as we discuss the budget further. Councilman Pasqua.
2 questions. I know we've talked in the past about our impact fees and revisiting them. Do we have a number of how much money we have on hand for impact fees total?
So the balance as of March 25th was approximately 1.2 million.
And next question, do we have any results on that tax freeze audit that we did? As far as, did anybody come off the rolls? Do we find any savings or anything?
Can we just, is that something we can discuss? Solicitor? I just want to be careful.
To the extent that there's an impact on the budget, yes.
Okay.
But as to what the actual audit did or didn't, I would say no. Just the end product of it.
Okay.
So some people voluntarily withdrew themselves because they no longer qualified. We had approximately 3,000 people come in. Kerry has about 100 home visits to do over the next 2 weeks for people that are homebound. And upon that, we hope to have more solid numbers. So there's definitely been some people that are off the list. We don't have exact numbers right now.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion from the council? Director Civetti, I don't know if you wanted to speak to the memo that you sent the council in terms of the guesstimates on the rates.
Yeah, so again, I received a number of requests from various council members, just trying to see where we may be with the rate. We just did an update of the system, so the software in the tax assessor's office, we've had some problems trying to get that bridged, so it was worked on this afternoon, but these are numbers that, again, I can't say it enough, these are estimates, they're ballpark. Hopefully, we'd be close once we get those final figures. But when you look at the town manager's budget and we say that the amount of money that we're proposing to be raised from taxes, so the tax revenue is an increase of 3.93%. You have to remember that that's not necessarily the increase in the tax rate, where we have new property coming onto the tax roll, improvements to homes, that all affects the assessed values of the property, which brings in additional revenue. So what I gave you there was a comparison of what the projected valuation is as of December 31st of 23 compared to 12/31/22, looking strictly at the commercial real estate and residential real estate, and try to see what that would generate. As you can see from the memo, I'm saying just that additional property or increase in the assessed values would generate roughly $660,000. So now if you exclude that from what we're saying we need to increase the total levy by in the manager's proposed budget, rather than a 3.93% increase in the tax rate, you're looking at more in line of about a 3.25, 3.28% increase in the tax rate. So although we're generating close to that, 4% increase, some of that's generated by new properties coming onto the tax roll or increased in values. So you can't always just look at, that main number that it's grown, because we have growth within the community. And then at the bottom of the memo, I just gave you a couple examples so you can see our current tax rates. On the 2023 tax roll, our residential rate is $15.33, commercial rate $21.55. So if these numbers will hold true, your residential rate would go up to $15.83, commercial rate $22.26. And the impact, I gave you a few examples on residential homes. So a $250,000 residential home would go up about $126 a year. $300,000 home, $151 a year. And again, from there, you can see a few other examples. So I know sometimes, you just hear that 4% and everybody thinks the tax rate's going up 4%. Their property bill's going to go up 4%. That's not true. And again, these are estimates. I can't state that enough, but we should have those final figures, hopefully, as we continue to work through the freeze component, as well as just getting the system updated. And that's another, significant item in here, just to mention. I included the freeze in here at the same amount that was on last year's levy, just for, have a number, because I don't know that freeze number at this point. Same thing with the tangible levy, where, as you may know, the state's looking to phase out the tangible tax, so we're required to reduce everybody's tangible assessment by $50,000 assessment value. So in the current proposed budget, we still include it as if it's going to be town revenue from tax bills. As I see it right now, we envision us getting made whole from the state of Rhode Island. So it's just going to be coming through state aid versus the town tax line item. So very similar to what took place with the motor vehicles.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, you have here in the box toward the bottom, estimated increase as percent of the fiscal 2024 net levy. Does that mean, do you mean 25, or are you just giving an example?
Well, I'm saying, excuse me. So if I look just at the further up there, you have the fiscal 2024 net tax levy dealing just with the commercial and residential real estate is $65,569,000. What I'm saying, to get to the $68,378,000, you'd see a 3.28% increase in that levy number. And then I just apply that to the rate. So the residential rate of 1533, if you multiply that by 3.28%, you'll come up to the 1583 as a potential rate.
Councilor Shockley.
So this year went by really fast, and I don't think we ever looked at the idea of like a tiered tax rate. I know last year we discussed it when the reval changed people's property taxes so much. So I don't know if outside of the council, anyone's looked into that any further.
Any further discussion on Councilman Pasco?
I think there's some good suggestions as far as one-time purchases but I do agree with you on the ARPA side. Probably keeping them on ARPA. I wonder if we can, instead of using ARPA, use impact on some of these. I don't know the procedure on that.
Yeah, it's in the charter how it can be used, and I think you've seen in some resolutions throughout the year, these departments have the ability to dip into that as to pay for the one-time expenses. We've
So-
seen the police do it. We've seen the school department do it.
Hmm.
What are some other examples? Manager Bill?
Those are the two most current ones, police and school.
I think immediately.
They've used some as well. Yeah.
So, I mean, we got a few expenses here, the admin vehicle, even old North Road drainage, and it is, maybe using impact fees for that instead. I'd be interested in kind of shifting these around, pulling them out, and then letting them just submit a resolution for consideration on impact fees instead.
I just don't know that ordinance off the top of my head, if that's something that we can earmark like that.
Gotcha.
Do you have any insight on that, Director Civetti?
Yeah, not the details. Obviously, we have the categories. So when we get provided reports in the past, you have, I said our balance approximately 1.2 million. We do have the breakdowns of that. But as far as the details of the ordinance, if there's specifics within, but I can give you briefly the breakdown. So
If you could, please, thank you.
yeah, Parks and Recreation has available 67,710. Law enforcement's approximately 369,000. Road improvement, 247,000. Human Services, 39,000. Education, 250,000. Library, 83,000. Sewers, 68,000. And Public Facilities, 74,000. Again, that's through the end of, actually expenditures through the end of February. So if there were some recent resolutions approved, we'd have to subtract those amounts from here.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, so we've had some ideas thrown out on the table. What's the pleasure of the council? Any amendments this evening?
I still like my formal motion, but Kim can go first if
No,
you'd
no,
like.
that's fine. I don't know, President Lima, you had mentioned some items that you wanted to put into ARPA. Do you have any amendments that you'd like to make for items that can be reduced?
Let's see here. One small one that I think is worth considering would be the codification of ordinances. I don't anticipate needing more than over $15,000 a year in the budget to do that every year, unless I think that's something that, is done every 5 to 10 years. So I don't know what the council's appetite is for something like that with a one-time expense.
What was the total cost? I'm sorry.
15.5.
15.5. Okay.
I'll
And-
make a formal motion to reduce the budget by 15,000. What department was that in?
Town clerk.
Town Clerk's Department, 15,000, and utilize ARPA funds.
We have a motion by Vice President Blank.
Second.
Second by Councilman Pasco. Any discussion on the amendment? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua.
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi.
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley.
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
Councilmember Shockley.
I'd like to make a motion to reduce the capital improvement budget by $210,000 to $301,710. With those expenses to go to ARPA. And so that was line 980, I apologize, or Department 980. And for Department 710, the police motor vehicles line to be reduced by 82,767,000, also ARPA. Is that an official motion?
That's an official motion by Councilmember Shockley. And is there a second?
That's gonna,
I'll
I have a
second the
question.
discussion.
Councilman Pasqua seconds the motion. Discussion. Councilman Capaldi, were you?
I just wanted to ask a question on the first one that she brought up.
So before I finish, I apologize. I didn't want it to be reduced from the budget. And I don't know if I have to make that part of my amendment, but I would like the funds to be allocated towards the school budget. Yeah. And the police motor vehicle. Three capital items. Yep. That equal a total of $210,000.
Councilman Capaldi, did you still have a question? Okay. Councilman Pasqua seconded. Discussion on the motion. Yeah, sure. Director Civetti.
I just want to make sure I have it. So you said Old North Road drainage, Giblin, and window replacement? I believe that's 200,000, not 210. I think it's 36,000 for Old North, 89,000 for Giblin, and 75,000 for the windows.
And that's 200,000.
I believe so, yes.
I did the math in my head instead of on my Excel spreadsheet.
Discussion on the motion, members of the council. I don't think that I can support the motion. We've used ARPA to supplement capital in the past few years. And I personally would like to draw a line in the sand and leave capital alone. We have a laughable capital budget, and I feel that we need to maintain the modest gains that we've made. And that's just one place that I personally can't budge and use ARPA on at this point. That's just my opinion. Vice President Blank.
I completely agree with that statement.
Councilman Pasqua.
I agree. It's a small budget. I was trying to find the ordinance on the impact fees to see if maybe that's an option, but I'm not finding it here. So,
but there's rules.
Okay. Well, being that I don't have a definitive answer, if we can get this stuff with impact, I don't know if I can support that.
Is it taking it out of capital or using ARPA funds? That is your issue.
Well, I mean, I don't want to use the ARPA funds. I think that they're getting low, and there may be things that pop up, and I'd rather hang on to what we have to kind of see where we go throughout the year. And the capital budget's already small. I mean, $500,000. It's quite a bit smaller than anywhere else. I don't know if I have the flavor for eliminating it out of the capital budget.
So I really have to get a read of the council as a whole. Is the intent right now to keep the school's budget at 200 towards their budget? I know there's more offered.
We just got to keep
But
the
are we-
discussion to this motion. So the motion is with respect to
Okay.
supplanting ARPA into capital. So let's just keep it to there.
Once
right
we're
now.
past the motion, I would really like to have that discussion as a council, because we can go one by one really slowly, or we could have a better discussion about kind of how we want to see this budget come out.
Further discussion on the motion from Councilmember Shockley. Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua,
No.
Councilmember Capaldi,
No.
Councilmember Shockley,
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc,
No.
President Lima.
No.
So that's 4 in the negative and 1 in the 1A. Motion does not pass.
We'll go for a third attempt. I'd still like to go back to my original motion, which was the 85,000 for the officer one, decreasing that line, increasing the repairs and maintenance for vehicles, and increasing the repairs and maintenance for computers.
Okay.
20,000 and 15,000 respectively, so for a net savings for that department or reduction of $50,000.
So we have.
That would be my motion.
Motion from Vice President LeBlanc. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Capaldi. Discussion on the motion. Manager Pearl, I don't know if you want to elaborate at all.
No, again, it was just recounting, going over the manpower again, trying to get the numbers as tight as we can. And that's when the chief identified that he's not going to be able to fill that additional spot. So rather save that money in the budget than just let it linger there. And he did identify we're cutting some of his other line items kind of tight. And he did notice that those two things, those two items, the maintenance of vehicles and maintenance of computers is going to put him in a tough spot. So he asked if we could have that $35,000 back out of the 85. So that was the thought process on that request.
Councilor Shockley, your hand was up.
Yeah, like I said, I think in a budget that is already tight, I really appreciate putting out there that one officer, reducing by one officer makes sense for as far as how you can truly staff the department. In a budget where you had already decided other line items that needed to be consolidated, I don't know that why we then add back for this year, understanding that every year we're going to need to make some increases. Like I said, the police budget actually has seen a very healthy increase in its allocations this year.
Director Civetti.
So just to comment on that, elaborate. So on the repairs and maintenance line, that was an error when we put the town manager's budget together, the final. I was looking at the year-to-date actual, but unfortunately there were two line items that should have all been consolidated, but there was a former account that the police department was utilizing. So when I looked at the year-to-date actual, there was only about 18,000 spent allocated to the line item that we're budgeting, and where he had proposed 65,000. But then we found the other line item in discussion with the police chief and the business manager there, and saw that there was another line item for about the same amount, 17 change. So actually through the end of January, they had spent 35,000. They were already over 50,000 currently on that line item. So that's why the chief's looking to get that restored. And then on the computer components portion, speaking with the IT personnel over there, they looked at the actual cost in their budget, and out of the budget line item of 114,000, there's about 100,000 that's contractual. So related to various programs they have, and it's a cost that has to be there. So we were leaving them with no extra revenue for computer purchases or items that they, computer components that they utilize on an annual basis. So that's where they asked for the additional 15,000 back there. So you could say it just wasn't, we missed a couple items as we went through the budget.
Sure. And I understand the visual that we have of town departments. We get to see each and every line item that they have. We work with them every day. The town manager used to be a police officer, has an understanding of that department and its needs. But it's almost like we've decided that because we don't see the school's budget as clearly, there aren't line items that they cut or could use more towards. We're doing a very us and them. And I feel it's really kind of a proximity bias. Last year, we almost bought all new computer software for our banking because our town manager said we needed it. And maybe now it's 2 years ago. Like I said, time's going by pretty fast. Then realized we didn't need that at all. We almost spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it because the person closest to it thought it was a necessary cost. And I think it's a very common thing to do. I'm not questioning the needs of any of these line items. What I'm saying is, how are we going to decide to make this final budget? Because we're doing onesie twosies on our amendments right now. And I think we really need to say, as a whole, this is what we want the budget to look like. And instead, we're making these like little one at a time amendments to it. And I don't know that that's the best way to get to whatever the end result is going to be. Because truly, I could care less about $15,000 coming out of the budget. I have no problem with it, but it just seems like a one at a time when we're not really showing our end game. What's our 5-year plan? What's our vision for what this budget is going to give us for opportunities next year and the year after? So I guess I'm kind of getting lost in the details, maybe missing the forest for the trees here. What's our end game? And I don't think we're focusing on that right now.
Any further discussion on Vice President LeBlanc's amendment for the police department? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua,
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi,
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley,
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc,
Yes.
President Lima,
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passed.
Further discussion, members of the council? Councilmember Shockley.
I'm once again going to put my question forward. Is this the budget that we see working for the town and the school this year? We've reduced one line by $50,000 and one line by, or one department by $50,000 and one department by $15,000. Is that what we see as the budget for this year? And if so, to what end? What is our expectation for what the school department is going to do if this is the budget we put forth? I don't think it's responsible. I think we are putting our town in a very bad position, knowing that our finance director, without that consolidation, thinks that school needs $1 million. Knowing that the person on our town council who's an auditor and our finance director think they need even more than they asked for. I don't quite understand what our end game is for the current budget proposal. And I would like to hear from the rest of my council members what your thoughts are.
Members of the council? I think I said this already when I proposed my cuts, but I'm not interested in when I make reductions. I have other reductions that I plan to make. And I'm not interested in taking the reduction I make in the town side and moving it over to the school side. I said that already. I don't know what other members of the council feel. Vice President LeBlanc.
So this is challenging all around on the town side and the school side. I do want to make sure the public is aware that the council had given the school $320,000 last year for one-time expenses, $425,000 to be spent this year for pumping fees, not a penny from the school for the pumping fees for their septic problem, $200,000 that we paid for a septic pump truck to try to offset some of the costs that we would incur if we did not buy that septic pump truck. We also secured through our grant writer $4 million, again, to assist with their septic problem. And if they didn't have a pump or a septic system, they wouldn't be able to have their operations. Again, coming from the town side for all of this. We also give $650,000 towards their SRP pension, which I've been told is very unique for a municipality on the town side to fund their pension. We also pay for school crossing guards. We will be paying for $240,000 towards the school building bond once that's authorized, again, on the town side. And as I brought up earlier, we essentially got mandated $146,000 for 5 years to help fund their already what I would call a spending problem, or what others call a deficit. So we've given them much more than what they're showing to us in their local appropriation. And I have no problem if they want to come in front of us, if they need ARPA funds, during this upcoming fiscal year. I have no problem them letting us know why, and then we can have a discussion and we can supplement. But I have no interest in increasing the local appropriation to the schools.
Councilman Pasqua.
For me, it's not really a goal of underfunding them or anything like that. It's not about a statement or anything. I'm looking at the budget. It's up near its 4%, 3.93. And I'm considering things like the schools are going to be a department of the town that's going to be receiving millions of dollars in upgrades this year. The well water is going to be fixed in Western, and there's a lot of visual improvements. There's a lot of improvements coming to the school, so they're getting quite a bit of attention, and the bond payments coming out of the municipal side for that, which of course is approved by the taxpayers. And I'm looking at the schools were also given another $1 million this year in funding from the state, where a lot of other school districts were not, they took cuts, so they broke even with the state this year. We got almost $1 million more. We've incorporated the $140,000 into the town budget for the debt service repayment, I should say, for the Auditor General's plan. So there's quite a bit going into the schools on the town side that's not part of that 225,000. And while I understand it's difficult to operate them under the MOE, I've looked through this budget, there's not a lot of room on it at all to make any changes to get to that point. And when you consider all the things that they're getting this year, for me, it's a tough sell to move it around even more.
Councilman Capaldi, you had your hand up.
I agree with both Councilman LeBlanc and Pasqua. I'm new to this council. My daughter is in the district, so I understand the pain. But learning what I've learned on all that the town has given over the past couple of years, I guess, I can't agree with giving them more money than what is in this budget now.
I just want to further emphasize my point as well. I have a really difficult time with the promise of a committee that will meet and really take the deficit seriously and put together a well thought out plan. Because quite frankly, in our leadership meetings we had last year in the even late summer, early fall, they knew they were facing this deficit. They told us that. So it wasn't a matter of they didn't have enough time. They chose to wait to have a conversation with teachers. They chose to wait to have a conversation with parents, and waited till a time when they had no runway to have a lengthy discussion with parents. I also have an issue with promises of collaboration when there hasn't been much of that reciprocated in the almost 3 years I've been on the council. It's very much been disregard and demand. Specifically in the last year, we voiced our concerns before a vote on the teacher's contract and leadership and said we would recommend these changes based on the fiscal note. It was ignored. We asked that they not vote on the SRP contract before we had a chance to verify the fiscal note. We were told in the public meeting, I'm sure you guys will figure it out, and a vote took place anyway. It was no secret that we were going to face this budget challenge if that contract passed last year. We had the fiscal note that said that. We asked for support in their budget with dealing with the septic system problem. We were told that's our problem. So and not to mention, I don't appreciate how we were blindsided by the plans that they had. I don't think that was fair. I don't think that was in terms of a partnership. I don't think that was collaboration. So I'm just at a point where I don't know how much longer I can continue to hear the promises of things will be different and collaboration will happen. I mean, we talked about the positions were brought up tonight, the ones that were funded by ESSER and CARES Act funding. I remember being a member of the public in 2021, asking the then superintendent, Craig Levis, how are you going to fund these positions when this money runs out? And the answer was, we'll have to figure that out later. It was never figured out. I just don't feel a sense of that there's accountability or a political will or appetite to make difficult decisions like this council has had to make on our end. I feel very much that this school committee knew they had a deficit. They put the proposal out there, whatever proposal it may be, and then just decided that they'd rather ask us to tax our way out of it instead. So I know there's a proposal for 17.5 positions to be eliminated. I don't know how many times in the past I've seen layoff notices be given in the summer, all for most of them to be hired back right before school starts. So I feel like the tail's been wagging the dog, and I truly at a loss for how else to address a major, major deficit, which in my opinion, the deficit number I think the school believes they have is lower than I believe it actually is. I don't think, is the 1.8 correct? Because we've seen, yes. So, and not to mention, we've heard that even if we could give them the full allocation, say we don't cut another dime from the town side, and we legally can't give them all that they're asking for. And even say if we gave whatever that, what is it, 0.07% up to the 4 to max it out, that's maybe $400,000, if that. Is that like, where is the line for dangerous at that point? Is an extra $400,000 getting us away from the brink of dangerous? I think the real issue here, as Vice President LeBlanc said, is they're being given money by the town. The issue is it's not being put in a form that they can spend how they'd like under their control. I think that's the real issue here. So, you know, I really thought that things could be different. I really thought, our side had initiated having joint leadership meetings starting 2 years ago. And I just feel like we've stepped up in times when they've needed it here and there along the way. And I don't feel that we were heard when we asked for consideration to be made on contracts and consideration to be made with respect to the deficits. And that's not a partnership. So, and I don't know how many times we can say, well, we should get everybody together again, and we should really try. And so at what point is enough enough? So that's just some further color. Councilmember Shockley.
So far, we've talked about the money we're giving to the schools, and I don't disagree with you. We haven't, except for the $225,000 line item, none of that is from their budget. So they're budgeted for things. Within the budget is not the $140,000 for reducing the deficit. From the budget is not the septic system, which is a larger project now than it would have had to be if we'd kept it just to the schools. We've made it a larger project with federal funding. We've listed all these dollar amounts we're giving. None of it's from the budget. So I still ask the question, to what end? Because what is our expected outcome of this? It seems like in the past, since I've lived in Coventry, every year, based on voter approval needed, the budgets have been reduced for both the town and the school side. It seems as if on the town side, our thought process is we are the victims of circumstance, and now we're trying to rebuild ourselves. Through no fault of our own, budgets have been rejected. They already were too low. Once they were rejected by taxpayers, we were cutting from places we didn't want to cut from. Hence the capital issues we're having, the roads. Looking at a budget where both sides have been in the same predicaments, and let's not pretend the town up until this point has had better finance people, better management, better counsel. What we're saying is we're the victim of circumstance and they're the victim of their own decisions, 100% across the board. So we're giving all this money to these specific things, which I think is great. And I'm glad we have the ARPA money so that a septic system can be pumped out on a regular basis. But I still have to ask the question, to what end? What is our end result that we're thinking is going to be accomplished with this budget? As I mentioned before, all people are saying up here is they're not getting enough. They're going further into a deficit. What's our end hope? What do we think is happening based on this budget we're creating? Because I'm very concerned. Saying they were able to cut last year and so should be able to cut this year doesn't really make sense. And if I'm trying to pay my monthly bills and my septic system breaks and my dad comes and pays for it, I still have to figure out how to pay my monthly bills. It's still the same budget on the table. If we think we should have better insight into their budget, if we're saying that we think we should be able to manage their budget and we think there's a way of doing that, I know that other towns have tried it and it hasn't gone that well. I back you 100%. Let's get that line item detail of the school's budget. But right now, my concern is that part of the money we're giving the school is because we think they're underestimating their need. So I don't see how our two lines of rationale match up. They're underestimating their need and they need more, and we're going to give less. So unless we think there are line items within that budget and they only need more because they don't know how to reduce, we don't know. What sort of ability do we want to see that? Because right now I'm looking at a situation where I don't know how we come back from it if we're wrong.
Vice President Mike.
Just wanted to clarify, the 140,000 for the overspending or the deficit restructure plan, that's in the budget. The 650,000 for SRP pension, that is in the budget. The school crossing guards funding, that is in the budget. So there were several items that I had mentioned that are all in.
The SRP's in the budget, but we fund it?
Yes.
I'm confused. But we've always funded it? But we've
Yeah.
always funded it.
Right, but you said
Yeah.
it wasn't in the budget. It is 650,000 is in the budget.
No, it's not in their budget.
Correct, but it's.
Right. So what I'm
that
saying
they're
is
paying on their behalf.
100%. I don't disagree with what you're all saying. It's not like you have to be wrong for me to be right. That's not necessary. I'm not saying you're wrong. We're giving them this money, but we've always given them this money. Like, we pay the SRP pension. That's how it has been. I don't know when that started. I'm using the word always probably more loosely than I should. Sure.
What? So we are paying that 650. So the town is. Every single year I've been on council, and every meeting I had been on that I went to 3 years before being on council, I've heard the school say, we're gonna live within our budget every single time. And my point is, we've given them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars more almost every single year because they can't live within their budget, Kim. I hear it
Neither
every
can we.
single
We're
year.
about to increase ours by $4 million.
Yeah, because we've been giving them the money. We haven't been improving our roads. We haven't been investing in our infrastructure for sanitation. That impacts every single resident in this town, roads and sanitation, right? Every single one.
I
Only
agree.
30% of the residents actually benefit from the schools, that actually sends their children to the schools, okay? So the town side has taken it for so long that they need money to be invested on the town side, which is, again, going back to my main comment, why I have no interest in increasing the school's budget this year.
100%, but no one's answered to what end. What's our intent with this budget? What do we think the outcome's going to be, and how sure are we?
Director Civetti, I just have a question. What back statistically, how many years, say in the past 5 years, has the school department run a deficit? Do we know?
I know last year, I believe it was 1.7 they used ESSER, I believe. The year prior to that, they used fund balance of $1 million, and that left 700,000 left over. That was the 22 number. So those are the last 2 years prior to this. Obviously, this one they're saying they're right on this year. I don't know how accurate that is. We'll have to wait and see. But just get back to Councilwoman Shockley. We did Director Civetti offered to help them, to provide someone, if not himself, someone else to go over all of their personnel expenses, set up a chart with every employee, with every benefit, with every bonus, everything they get in order to have a pattern to know what each individual employee costs them going forward and how that changes as they increase steps. He told them we would do it on our side last year. And they never took us up on that offer.
I still have the floor, I have another question. How, in those years where they've run a deficit that's required based on the Auditor General's letter to submit corrective action plan and a deficit reduction plan, how many times have those been submitted? Has that been done?
And I have
22
to
as
go
far
back and look, yeah, as far as I know, 22 was the only year, because that's when they went to a cumulative deficit. So they've had surpluses, so even though they may have an operating deficit, as long as they had a cumulative fund balance, there's no reason for a deficit reduction plan. Fiscal 2022 is my understanding when they first went into a full deficit position.
Is fund balance supposed to be used to fill recurring deficits?
Fund balance, theoretically, you should use fund balance, but for one-time items. Because if you're using it for normal operating costs, you're basically building a structural deficit within your budget. So, same thing here with the council rate. We have a fund balance of 5 million, 10 million, whatever that number is. I would never recommend using it to supplement your budget. Rather, you would use it for items such as, one time only if you had the sewer project or something major that you had to utilize, but definitely not to fund positions and payroll, because you're just creating a further problem down there.
And also, what was I think I certainly like remember, what was the final number on the due to, due from issue that we gave back?
I believe it was 2.1 million.
Okay. That goes back to when they separated out into their own account. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this deficit problem isn't new, and there hasn't been any substantial effort really made to take accountability for it and live within the means. It seems it's just continues to get worse, and we're told that we just need to increase our way out of it in terms of appropriation instead of really looking at the issue here. And I want to go back to Vice President LeBlanc's point. We've seen this town grow in terms of its residents. So it would make sense that the services the town side provides need to see that increase go along with it. We have seen a reduction in enrollment, and we have seen an increase in staff hires. It's with the school department. So it's not making sense. And of course, that's why we would see the town side see an increase. And I really have to, this data where it compares, I mean, I was not a math major in college, but to compare what 5% of a year-over-year change of a $27 million allocation to 1.52% of a $50 million allocation is pretty different.
Yes, it is. The larger budget
But
would
Hold-
sensibly grow more. The
hold-
town's
hold
allocation
on,
has
hold on.
actually grown by
Hold on.
about
I'm-
8%.
I'm not finished. So I don't appreciate, because this isn't the first time that these kind of numbers have been presented in a way that's favorable, but not exactly an apples to apples comparison. I think we also called out during Superintendent Levis's time, there was a chart that they presented where the y-axis and the x-axis were written backwards in terms of totals to make it look like enrollment was going up and the hires, the full-time equivalent hires were going down, until we said, this isn't right. So I have an issue with trying to spin things to fit a certain narrative when this is very clearly not an apples to apples comparison. And the fact that this was taken and used as a pillar of an argument with the public, I don't appreciate either. I don't feel like that's a good faith discussion with the public. So I'm now finished with what I've had to say. I know that you had questions for Manager Prillo and you had other comments, so I'll yield the floor to Councilor Shockley.
Yeah, still at this point, I don't have anything that alleviates my concerns about the budget that we're putting forth right now. I have seen the same things happen to the schools that have happened to the town. We're talking about how we haven't been able to put money into our roads and into our buildings. Well, that's why septic systems fail and just sit there failing for years, because when the allocations don't go up, we don't put any money into our capital. We've done the same thing on both sides. There's no difference to what has happened with the school and the town. We're differentiating them so much right now. We're treating it like the school has led an entirely different fiscal existence than the town over these years of budget cuts. We are saying that they have to take full ownership, but we're going to start building up our capital on this side, which I think is great. I want to be able to do these things, but we have ARPA money that we never would have had before. This is money that exists to help towns get all of their departments to where they may be able to survive and thrive. Whatever people decide to do for a vote is up to you. But this is the most concerning thing I feel we've done as a town council, is sit up here, say how there are deficits happening, say how the school can't afford itself, and then simultaneously give 10% of the requested allocation towards the budget. When you say you weren't a math major, I wasn't a math major either, but that doesn't make sense to me. You can't afford what you're doing at the budget you asked for, so we're going to cut it by 90% of your ask for this year. They allocated in state funding. They allocated in the cell tower that they'd already had. They had no reason to think they'd be paying their SRP pension because it's always been on this side. The septic system and the issues it has, I thank God that we have ARPA money that could pay for it, or else what would we all be doing right now? We have a situation this year, and maybe even into next, depending how we spend it, where we have these additional funds. And when we talk about the issues that the town has with the school, I feel like we're talking about the issues that our president and vice president have with the school committee's president and vice president, because I've never been privy to a single one of these conversations. And when I talk to people who are in management on the back end, on both the school side and the town side, I hear very different things than what I hear in this public forum. So I am looking at a full budget here for the town and the school. And I am looking at the fact that we have town departments that are growing this year by large percentages. And that we are saying, because we're spending money on the school to take care of these needs that fall outside their budget, we shouldn't fund their budget. And that doesn't make sense. I know people did not want to fund the teacher contracts, but we did. And even though it wasn't a unanimous vote, the town council voted to fund it. And even though people didn't want to fund the town council, fund the school teachers, we voted for every other increase this year as well, I believe unanimously. And if we had 400 police officers, we'd go out of business. But because we have 400 teachers, we're deciding that we shouldn't keep up with the increases and pay attention to the fact that we deal with unions. We're looking at people who have for years, current staff excluded, have had finance directors and management that doesn't know what they're doing. And that the town council and school committee are only here because we raised our hand the highest. And we don't really know what we're doing either. So because I'm up here, and this will be my last chance to vote on one of these budgets, I'm telling you, I think we are making a dangerous mistake right now if this is the budget that we put forth.
So as of right now, we have 65,500 that we would reduce from the resolution on page 29. Just bring that page up.
And I feel very uncomfortable that after this discussion, this town council feels comfortable voting on this tonight.
So it would be. Can we just make sure in the future, all of our resolutions have line numbers to help with if we do amendments? Just the 2024-33 doesn't have them. Let's see, so it would be. It would be from the first bullet. This would be the 120. 338. 42 minus. I did want to throw out for discussion, use of some ARPA to defray the large increase when it comes to vehicle maintenance. I did want to revisit that. That's almost a $300,000 bite at the apple to increase at once. I just want to see what the appetite of the council may be to use some ARPA to help ramp that increase up. I'm open to if it's 100K or but that's something that it just feels really steep, and I'd like to see some consideration to maybe how we can defray. If there's no appetite, that's fine too. I had same thing with sidewalks and roads. Those are obviously big bites at the apple. I don't know if there's any appetite to further ease into fully funding that operationally. Or we can just leave it baked in. Manager Perillo and the town clerk, do we feel like it's realistic to consider a resolution for licensing fee adjustments at the April 23rd meeting?
I think that could be a heavy lift for the 23rd. I reached out to the league. I thought they were doing a comparison, like I said, but it was an independent company that was doing it that reached out. So there is no data out there. We would have to just do our own research, comparing ourselves to other communities. It's a possibility. I can.
Just because
can try.
don't all the licenses, isn't May 1st the deadline for licenses or renewals? I'm sorry. Okay, so that's why I think April 23rd.
We can try to get that done.
Okay.
And then we can look at the impact fees too. I mean, that would just be the council, if you just wanted to go back to what it was probably 2, 3 or 4 years ago, you could change that
Okay.
if you want to put that
The
forward.
impact fee.
Yeah, I'm sorry, impact fees.
Vice President Lang.
Just a clarification on that, at least from the process that I was a part of before, directors needed to submit what their capital improvements would be. There'd be a calculation on how we get to what the impact fee was. I don't think it's as easy as going back to what it used to be. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Director Civetti, how much do you anticipate we should see any adjustments in the manager's proposed budget between now and when the formal adoption comes in early May? Or should I say May in general? Because I know I think you literally use the word guesstimate in your memo about rates. So I just like to know, like, you say guesstimate, but is that really guess or?
Again,
It's an accounting term.
Yes, thank you. That's based on the information I had available. We're hoping that we would have the final valuation numbers prior to your vote on May, I believe it's May 7th. So again, within the next couple of weeks, we should have those final numbers and we'll be able to give you what, if this budget were to be approved as is with these couple of adjustments, what the actual tax rate would be. So we should have that for the May 7th date. So again, based on the information I had available that we printed out on Friday, reviewed today, as we were trying to still update the system. I think this is accurate based on what we have available.
Okay. And then I believe this is germane to the discussion. There was talk about having CLA come in on the 23rd to give a status update. Is that still happening, Manager Brillo?
I reached out to them today and told them that, that is our goal, that they will be here on the 23rd, and still waiting to hear back. We gave them a piece of information they were lacking today. That was a big lift, and I think there's one open thing left, and we should be good to go. So I'm still waiting to hear back, but we're definitely shooting for the 23rd for the 22 draft.
Okay. All right. So based on the amendments we've had to the budget, we need to make some amendments to the resolution. So in the first bullet, that will be 120. Are you doing this along with me? Okay. So I'm doing the total expenditure of $120,838,842, subtracting the 65,500. 773. Do that again. 120,838,842 minus 65,500. Okay, yep, you were right. So that would be. Oh, whoops. And then the ARPA, we need to subtract, we need to add. That would be, and then the ARPA adding 15,500 would be 163,500. So we're going to be amending the total expenditure in bullet 1 to $120,773,342, and in bullet 6, amending the ARPA amount to $1,630,500. Do I have confirmation on those?
I'll make the motion.
State aid, general government, school departments. $443,228. Okay, so those three numbers are needed in the amendment.
I'll make the motion for all three.
All right, so motion from Vice President Blank. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Pasqua. Discussion on those numbers. We've confirmed with Vice President LeBlanc and Director Civetti. Any discussion on the amendments? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua,
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi,
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley,
No.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
4 in the affirmative and 1 in the negative. Motion passes.
We're now back to the resolution as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua,
Yes.
Councilmember Capaldi,
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley,
No.
Vice President LeBlanc,
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
4 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Motion passes.
Okay. Moving on to public comment for undocketed items. Are there members of the public in council chambers who'd like to make a public comment on undocketed items? Any members of the public on Zoom, public comment on undocketed items? Raise your hand to be let in. Going once. Good evening. State your name and address for the record. And unmute yourself.
I believe you're on mute.
Can we go to the other person while they figure that out? Good evening. State your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Trisha Hunt, 526 Camp Westwood Road.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay,
can hear you.
perfect.
Yep.
I just wanted to make a general comment after watching tonight's town council meeting, so I think it counts as a non-docketed item. It just seems like there's a disconnect in the way the town council is communicating, and I feel like Councilwoman Shockley has brought up a lot of really worthwhile discussion points, and I think she's made a lot of valid points, and I don't know if this is the comment that's allowed to be made. I won't comment on the items on the agenda, although I wish I could. I just feel like she made a lot of really good valid points, and I hope that maybe after tonight they're considered more fully and that a vote does not happen tonight for the budget.
Thank you. We want to go back to AG Carroll. Just unmute yourself. Or it still has Trisha on screen. All right, going once, twice, 3 times. Public comment is closed. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for one item pursuant to Rhode Island General Law, Section 42-46-5A2 for litigation matters re Social Holdings LLC, v. Town of Coventry. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion.
All those in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. We go into executive session. That's not coffee. You drink other fluids besides coffee? Could I have a motion to come out of executive session?
Make a motion.
Motion by Vice President Blank,
Second.
second by Councilmember Shockley. Any discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua, Councilmember Capaldi,
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley,
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
Could I have a motion to seal the minutes of executive session?
Make motion.
Motion by
second it.
Councilmember Shockley, second by Vice President Blank. Any discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pasqua, Councilmember Capaldi,
Yes.
Councilmember Shockley,
Yes.
Vice President LeBlanc.
Yes.
President Lima.
Yes.
5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion passes.
Members of the public, the council met in executive session for the following round general laws, section 42-46-5A2 for litigation matters, re Social Holdings LLC v. the Town of Coventry. A discussion was had, no votes were taken. Could I have a motion to adjourn at 9:12 PM?
Make the motion.
Motion by Vice President Blank,
Second.
second by Councilmember Shockley. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.